Okay, hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Angrath, Minotaur pirate. He's been out for, I don't know, about a month or so at this point. And we got to talk about, is this Angrath any good? Well, I'll let you know, but let's get there by breaking him down first. Okay, what do we got? 147 hit points, which is crazy. It's the most hit points in the game. The original Angrath had the most hit points in the game at the time, which was 135, and now it's crept up to 147. So that is one of the good things he's got going for him. The other one is his mana bonuses. Basically, you get 8 mana on a 3 match of black and red, and 1 mana if you match white, and the rest are even. And that's pretty good. I actually really like this spread. It's got great mana bonuses on his on colors, and then you don't really get that penalized for blue and green. Pretty much you only get penalized for matching white. So that gives you some flexibility on what type of mana you want to convert to with him. So kudos to Webcorp for at least giving him a fighting chance in that regard. But let's talk about his abilities because we really need to. First, we'll talk about deck limits. 8 creatures, 6 spells, and 5 supports. Not really my favorite. I don't need that many creatures in a deck. I don't know why the designers of this game, no matter who you have at the helm, they don't seem to realize that there's no reason to have 8 creatures in your deck, no matter what type of strategy you're going with. The only time that's relevant is when you're mastering a bunch of creatures at the same time. In any other case, I would much rather be able to put more spells and especially more supports into my deck. So basically, you're putting 4 creatures max into a deck at most, and there's usually a good reason for it. The rest of the deck you're going to want to be able to shape in any way you want. So minimum 7 spells and 7 supports as your deck limit is optimal for any planeswalker going forward. Gathering the Crew. Ability 1, 10 loyalty. Create 3 Angrath Vessel tokens. Discard 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. So what does the Angrath Vessel token do? It's a support card with 2 shields. It's an artifact and is colorless. When you draw a creature card, that creature gains the pirate subtype. At the beginning of your turn, the first pirate card in your hand gains X mana. X is this support shield. So already there's a problem with it for me that you have to discard the 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. So you're not gaining any card advantage there. If this was discarding 2 cards and then drawing 4 cards, that would be a much better ability. It'd be a lot better to use because basically as it stands right now, you're just filtering your deck for pieces a lot of times, right? So if you're discarding the 2 cards, say you get a lucky opening start and you get enough loyalty and enough mana into your hand to be able to use that first ability. If you want to use it though, you're going to discard the 2 cards in your hand with mana and get new cards with no mana in them. And depending on the type of deck builder you are, I like all of my cards to be doing something for me. Even in the beginning, it doesn't always work out that way, but that's to me the optimal usage of it. To me, that's optimal deck building strategy. So if you're discarding the 2 cards with mana in your hand to get 2 cards without mana in their hand, you really need something more to benefit from that. Anything could have been interesting. Maybe the cards that you discarded from your hand get buried in some certain amount of mana. At least that's doing something for you in your graveyard, even if they're not in your hand. So that's already a mistake, I feel. To be able to benefit from your creatures becoming pirates, you have to use this ability to create that vessel token. So you're already putting yourself at a disadvantage to create this token that will hopefully pay off for you later on. So there are times where you want to put things into your graveyard. There are times where I'll do my best to take advantage of this. And if I have a spell like Rite of the Moth that will bring creatures out from my graveyard into play, then discarding the 2 creatures from my hand first makes a lot of sense. But it's just not a useful ability a lot of the times until later on in the game. And you want a first loyalty ability to help you in the early game to get things going. So this doesn't really do that for you in the way that you would want it to. It can help a little bit, but not enough really to justify it. And then at 10 loyalty, it's pretty costly for what you get out of it compared to other loyalty abilities like Archangel Elspeth, for example. Only 6 loyalty gives you immediate help in the early game by helping you get a creature out on the board, destroying your library without having to discard. It's just such a superior ability overall to this one. Pirate Smash, ability 2, 13 loyalty. Deal X damage to the first opposing creature. Already kind of off to a bad start. Up to 3 random supports lose X shields. This can affect Vanguard supports. That's okay. But the X is very dependent on a few things here. X is the greatest power among pirate creatures you control. Well, the problem is there. So if you're not going to use his first ability, you have to put pirates in your deck. And there really aren't that many strong pirates in the game right now, especially in Standard. There's Ripley Vance. A couple of the breaches I like. They're okay, but definitely not top tier creatures. And then Ripley Vance is really good in certain deck builds. It's not really a creature that I would use in red and black for the most part. I mean, you can, but it's not really the best creature there. So that means you then have to rely on your first ability, making your creatures become pirates, and you have to draw into the creature to make it a pirate. You can't just cheat it into play with a card like Ride of the Moth or any of those cards that bring creatures back into play. You have to cast it from your hand to make it become a pirate. So it's limiting in that way as well. And then you're dealing a finite amount of damage to an opposing creature, and you're also only making supports lose a certain amount of shields. If you can get the pirates on the board, this ability can be useful, but a lot of times I find myself wanting to use it, trying it, and it not doing anything because I didn't fulfill enough of the requirements for it to do anything. So this ability can be useful, but it usually is not. Rage of the Minotaur, ability 3, 20 loyalty. Destroy all creatures. Deal X damage to your opponent's planeswalker. X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards. Then return the first creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature gets plus X plus Y. Y is 2 times that damage dealt to your opponent. So this ability can be useful in certain situations. It's 20 loyalty, so it's a little expensive to destroy all the creatures. I mainly use this ability when my other creatures have been knocked out with a Rakdos or something like that, and I just need to get some momentum back onto my side a little. The buffing is cool, but it's not really that much. You really have to build to mill out your library and your opponents, so you're not really going to get a lot of creatures in the graveyard without that. Then returning the first creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield is cool, and the buffing is nice too, but the cost in order to get that benefit usually outweighs that benefit. So these abilities are largely irrelevant to me. When I use him, I honestly don't use them very often. They're just some very niche cases when I want to, because there's sometimes I will get some advantage. So most of the time when I'm using him, I'm ignoring his abilities and just using the strength of the cards, the HP, and the mana bonuses. So with that in mind, I do have some decks here that I do like playing. I think it runs him well because of his mana bonuses, but his abilities and stuff do nothing really more than that to help you. So let me show them off for you real quick. All right, my first deck here is based upon creating a lot of token supports and destroying them and reaping the benefits. So we got Guillaume, which is going to be one of the main ways of creating those tokens, and Angrath, Eater of All is going to be the one that's going to take the most advantage of them. So what do we got here? Guillaume, if you don't know, when a creature enters the battlefield under your control, create 2 food tokens. When a player matches a food supports gem, a random creature you control without prevent damage gains prevent damage and reach until end of turn. Angrath, Eater of All. Ward, drain 6 mana from hand. When a creature dies or a support is destroyed, and that's a support on either side, this creature gets +2/+2 and then gain 3 life. So we're going to be gaining a lot of life from this, and Guillaume is going to be creating a lot of food tokens. You're going to be gaining life that way as well. And so what do we have in here to create those tokens for us? We got Scurry of Gremlins. When this support enters the board, create X Gremlin tokens. X is equal to your loyalty. Then energize Y. Y is the number of creatures you control, including their reinforcements. Overload 1. Creatures you control get +1/+0. So you can make a lot of Gremlin tokens this way, especially if you're not going to be using his abilities very much. You're probably just going to be hoarding loyalty. So you're going to be able to create a lot of gremlins if you get this card out into play. Urabrask's Forge is going to be cool here too, because this guarantees you create at least 1 token every turn if you don't already have all 3 creatures on the board. And so the red Phyrexian Horror token has imminent death, so it's destroyed at the end of your turn, which will also help fuel Angrath, Eater of All. But if you already have 3 creatures on the board, then you're going to be giving the 3rd creature haste and trample till end of turn. So that also is a nice little benefit. Because we're going to be creating so many creature tokens, and it's then going to be creating a lot of food tokens, using Commodore Guff's -2 is going to be gaining you tons of mana, because it's going to count the shields of all supports you control, including the ones even with 1 shield. So if you have, 15 supports on the board, even with 1 shield, that's still 15 mana, right? On top of whatever shields are on Commodore Guff and anything else you have in play. So this can really get you a lot of mana as you go. Hell to Pay, nice way to hopefully take out a creature or deal some extra damage to your opponent, but it's really mostly there to create a bunch of gold tokens. X gold tokens, X is the number of red gems on the board. Molten Collapse is just some nice straightforward removal. Destroy the opposing card with the greatest mana value. This can affect Vanguard supports. Then if you descended this turn, destroy the opposing non-land support with the highest shield. We don't have anything in here that descends, so I don't really worry about it. It doesn't really do much for me. I can't even count on one hand the amount of times I've had that actually do anything for me. Tarion Soul Cleaver is great in this deck because food tokens are artifacts. So when a creature or artifact you control is destroyed or loses a reinforcement, your first creature gets +5/+5. Then your first creature gains vigilance until the beginning of your next turn. So this is great. A lot of things synergize with this card in this deck, including Urabrask's Forge, because that creature is destroyed at the end of your turn, so you're going to get an automatic +5 buff on your first creature just with this card, and that creature gains vigilance. So if you happen to have Angrath, Eater of All, you're going to give this one vigilance, and it's already got death touch, so if it blocks, it's going to kill it. Really neat. Shieldred's Edict, another cheap removal spell. It's just one of my favorite go-tos when I just need cheap, easy removal. Great card to use against something like Rakdos in the early game before it becomes a menace to you. Chimil, the Inner Sun, just a nice card advantage there. It's an artifact, so there's a little bit of synergy there. Not much, but it's really there for the Discover 4 twice at the end of your turn. If you can get this card out early, it means it will be able to do a lot for you as you go. So yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for this deck here. It could still use some tweaking to it. I don't think I've gotten it to the optimal stage just yet. There's just a lot of things that I like that interact with each other in this one. So that's why I wanted to showcase it for you here. Okay, I'll show you the deck that I like to use for pretty quick and easy training grounds wins here. So let's go. Okay, this is one of my go-to training grounds deck. It's all about getting all the pieces into play as quickly as I can and draining my opponent's life as quickly as I can as well. So what do we got here? We got Unstoppable Slasher and Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest. Those are going to be our main win cons. Loot the Key to Everything, Kylox's Volt Strider, Connecting the Dots, and even Breach the Multiverse and Over the Top are all going to be cards that are based upon getting our creatures out quickly and anything else that we need out into play. So, Loot the Key to Everything, not a strong creature for attacking, but it is resilient because it has the shield counter 3. At the beginning of your turn, return a random card from your exile to your hand. That card gains full mana. This is a great card to get into play early because not only is it going to be getting you full mana cards every turn, but it's also going to be fodder for Rakdos. The shield counters are going to be eating his destruction. So it's a really good counter to Rakdos for that reason, because you can go 4 turns before Rakdos can actually destroy him. So very nice card. Probably a card that's not being used quite enough, although I am seeing it more and more, so I think people are catching on with them. Kylox's Volt Strider. We got some high cost spells in here, so this is going to be really good at getting them out quickly. We also got Connecting the Dots, which is going to bring in any permanent into play that we want, especially combined with Loot. Loot makes it a little more unpredictable what you're going to get, but if you want to make sure you get a creature out on the board, you just chuck it from your hand, you exile it, and then it'll come right back into play next turn without having to pay any mana cost. So really amazing card. A staple in any red deck, really. Suspended Sentence is in here because, for one, it's a support. So things like Connecting the Dots can bring it into play. Over the Top can fill it with mana. And the way it works is, so you destroy a target opposing creature, then your opponent loses 5 loyalty. That 5 loyalty knock can be really useful depending on who you're going against. Going with someone who likes to spam loyalty abilities, this will at least slow them down a bit. At the end of your turn, increase this card's level by 1. Then if this card's level is 4 or more, you may return this card to your hand. If you do, it gains full mana. This will mean that it can come back to your hand, and it's going to be a recurring source of removal for you. So I like it for that reason. But you can go with something like Duretti Vanguard if you have it. That's also a nice call there. Or any other cheap removal spell that you like. Song of Tauntauns is here to give our creatures haste, but you can switch it out for something else if you like. But I just like that it's a cheap spell that gives your creatures haste, and you're going to want to have haste on them so that the Slasher and Dragonhawk do their damage as quickly as they can. Vraska Relic Seeker, I might take this out for something else. It's mostly in here because it makes your creatures gain Pirate subtype, so that synergizes with his second ability, but really it's mostly in here for the -1. Your pirate creatures gain double strike. So this is a natural choice for using an Angrath because you get a lot of benefit from your creatures becoming pirates. And the double strike is going to be great with Unstoppable Slasher because every time it deals combat damage to your opponent's planeswalker, your opponent is losing half their life. So if you have an Unstoppable Slasher with double strike, they're losing 75% of their life. And if you can get it with haste, it's doing that pretty quickly right off the bat. But there might be some better cards to use here if you want, but I just like that it gives all of your creatures double strike right off the bat. Breach the Multiverse is just there to bring in creatures that you want from your graveyard. And then Over the Top is just a way of getting more cards in your hand and giving them some mana. There's a lot of cards in this deck that would get mana from them, so that's why I go with Over the Top. So that's why I go with some supports here, so that Over the Top will give them mana, because it does not give spells any mana there. So that's what I like about this deck. It sets up really quickly a lot of times, and it wins games. almost as quickly. So I really like this deck. I think it really benefits from Angrath's high mana gains in his colors. So if you're able to build it, give it a shot. See if you like it. All right, let's talk about grades. As always, let's start with max HP, highest in the game. So it's obviously going to be an S plus, and that really matters, especially when you're burning through training grounds with them, and you don't want to waste potions on him. He can take, up to 30 damage before he starts to look like some of the other planeswalkers there. So really good advantage there. Mana spread. I really like it. He only has a -1 on one of his colors, so that also is one of the best things about him. So I'm giving him an A in mana spread there. He might actually be like close to an A plus or an S for me because of his lack of weakness in most colors, and he gets a nice color bump there. And he gets a nice bonus on his actual color. So A might be actually low on his mana spread there. But either way, if we're talking his positives, that's pretty much where they stop for me. His ability 1 is a C minus. I don't really like it at all for all the reasons I explained earlier in the video. So we don't have to belabor that point. His ability 2, his second ability might be even worse because it's so dependent on the ability 1, which is very mediocre. So I'm also giving it a C minus. His ability 3 will at least get you out of a jam and will hopefully put things into play that will help you recover from that board wipe. So I'm giving that one a C plus. It's a little expensive and the payoff should be a little bit more in my opinion. So he's getting a C plus there. Versatility, not really that versatile to me. He's so dependent on kind of a weak creature class, and his abilities do nothing for you if you completely ignore them and you want to go a different way with them. So I don't find him that versatile except for being able to play high cost cards in red and black. So he gets a little bit of redemption there. So I'm giving him a C minus there. Card utility, pretty much the same idea that unless you're playing pirates, which are not great, you're not really getting a lot from the cards. His abilities do next to nothing to help you with the cards, so he gets a really strong ding from me there. So I can only give him a D in card utility. Fun. He can be fun for running through training grounds quickly and just ignoring his abilities and going straight for the biggest, baddest creatures you have around. And so in that regard, he can be a little bit fun. But trying to build for his abilities and use them, I found to be a very unfun experience. So he gets a C plus there for me. If you ignore what he's built for, then you have more fun, which is never a good sign for a planeswalker. So his final grade for me is going to be a C plus. Because his max hit points and mana spread, it makes him a decent training grounds guy who is completely dependent on the cards that you use for him. But if you try to build for his abilities, I think he starts to fall apart really quickly there. So I really don't recommend him for anything other than being a planeswalker that you can throw a bunch of strong cards into and rip through training grounds pretty quickly. But I think the original Angrath is a lot more fun, a lot more unique. And even though he doesn't have the mana spread and the max hit points, I still think he's a better purchase than Angrath Minotaur Pirate. All right, well, if you were planning on picking him up and were discouraged from doing it, I'm sorry, but I think it's for your own good. And I hope that in the future, Webcore thinks of these criticisms and continues to strive to make better planeswalkers in the future, because I do feel like they were on a good roll for a long time. I don't know if the discussion around Grist being too powerful or not dissuaded them from making walkers have really good abilities, but I think there's a balance between having abilities that are too strong and ones that are not very effective at all. So I look forward to seeing what comes next from here, and if they can get back on track in creating planeswalkers that we all really love. Okay, looking forward to reviewing the next planeswalkers as they come out, and yeah, hope to see you around when they do. I hope to see you at the next review when they do. Take it easy, guys.